Let's start with the ones that got a little out of hand and work our way towards the ones that shook up the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation. Level 1, Armed and Dangerous. Miami-Dade FBI Shootout, 1986. On April 11, 1986, the FBI was hunting two suspects, Michael Platt and William Maddox, linked to a series of violent bank robberies and multiple murders, and both were ex-military and known to be heavily armed. 8 agents tracked the suspects to a black Chevrolet Monte Carlo in the Miami suburb of Pinecrest. One of the agents rammed into the suspect's vehicle, bringing it to a stop. But the moment the agent stepped out, rapid gunfire broke out. Platt and Maddox start firing a Ruger Mini 14 rifle and multiple handguns. On the other side, most agents only had .38 special revolvers or 9mm pistols. Caught in the open and outgunned, the agents scrambled to take cover behind their unmarked vehicles. One agent lost his shotgun during the collision. Others found their service weapons too slow to reload. Several weren't wearing body armor at all, and even the agents who had bulletproof vests couldn't stop the high-caliber rifle rounds. Platt, while wounded, continued moving tactically and firing as he advanced toward the agents' positions. Agent Edmundo Mireles stayed in the fight despite having severe injuries to his left arm. As others ran out of ammo or lay injured, Mireles repositioned, reloaded, and closed the distance to stop the attackers. He advanced on the suspect's vehicle and fired multiple close-range shotgun blasts, killing both Platt and Maddox. 2 agents, Jerry Dove and Benjamin Grogan, died in the process, and 5 more were wounded. Over 140 rounds were exchanged in under 5 minutes. The aftermath triggered a major overhaul in federal law enforcement, replacing revolvers with semi-automatic pistols, upgrading body armor, and restructuring tactical response training. Pine Ridge Indian Reservation Shootout, 1975. On the morning of June 26, 1975, FBI agents Jack R. Kohler and Ronald A. Williams drove onto the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota to arrest Jimmy Eagle, who was wanted for robbery and assault. Both agents were in unmarked cars and dressed in plain clothes to avoid any suspicion. Gunfire broke out immediately as the agents tried to enter the compound. They were pinned down by multiple shooters and were unable to escape. After agents Kohler and Williams were killed, the FBI launched a large operation at Pine Ridge. Believing AIM was behind the attack, they sent in hundreds of agents, and several AIM members were arrested and charged. But only one, Leonard Peltier, was ultimately convicted. Peltier was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms for the murders. His trial, however, became the subject of international controversy. Key witnesses later claimed that they were pressured into testifying. Crucial evidence was allegedly withheld. The Pine Ridge shootout became one of the deadliest events in FBI history, involving Native American activists, and to this day, Leonard Peltier remains in prison. Tyler, Texas courthouse shooting, 2005. On February 24, 2005, David Hernandez Arroyo Sr. arrived at the Smith County Courthouse for a child support enforcement hearing tied to an ongoing custody battle with his ex-wife, Maribel Estrada. But Arroyo had come armed with an AK-47 semi-automatic rifle, a handgun, and was wearing a bulletproof vest. As Arroyo spotted his ex-wife and his son, David Jr., on the courthouse steps, he raised his rifle and opened fire. Arroyo shot her multiple times, and she died at the scene. His son was shot in the leg and severely wounded. People started running for cover. A nearby sheriff's deputy started returning fire, trying to slow Arroyo down. During the gunfire, Mark Allen Wilson, a former soldier with a handgun, stepped in to help and fired at Arroyo. Wilson managed to hit Arroyo once, but Arroyo's body armor stopped his handgun rounds, and Arroyo turned and fired back with his rifle, striking Wilson and killing him on the spot. Arroyo then got into his truck and made a run for it, and began a high-speed police chase through downtown. Arroyo was firing at officers from the window. Police eventually stopped Arroyo by shooting him multiple times during the pursuit. He died at the scene. Philadelphia police standoff, 2019. On August 14, 2019, police in Philadelphia attempted to serve a drug warrant at a row house on North 15th Street in the Nicetown Tioga neighborhood. The target was 36-year-old Morris Hill, a convicted felon with a history of drug and firearms offenses. As officers entered the home, Hill immediately opened fire. The officers inside the building were forced to retreat and take cover as shots echoed through the narrow city block. Hill fired repeatedly at responding officers from inside the house, damaging police vehicles, and reinforcements quickly swarmed the area. 6 officers were shot in the initial gunfire, but miraculously, none of the injuries were fatal. Several officers were now trapped inside the home with the suspect for over an hour, unable to escape without risking further gunfire. Outside, hundreds of officers took up positions behind cars, walls, and buildings while trying to evacuate civilians. After a standoff that lasted over 7 hours and involved hostage negotiators, flashbangs, and tactical drones, Morris Hill surrendered peacefully around midnight. He exited the building unarmed and was taken into custody. Level 2. Organized mass shootings. Stockton bank robbery and police chase, 2014. On July 16, 2014, around 2 p.m., 3 armed men, Pablo Ruvalcaba, Jaime Ramos, and Alex Martinez entered a bank of the West Branch in Stockton, California. They were carrying AK-47 style rifles and took 2 employees and a customer named Misty Holt Singh as hostages. As the suspects left the bank with the hostages, officers were already waiting outside. With Misty and the others inside, the men forced one employee to drive a bank vehicle. What followed was a 1-hour police chase covering over 60 miles through the city. During the pursuit, the suspects leaned out of the windows, firing more than 100 rounds at officers. Police cars were hit repeatedly. Civilians drove for cover, and dozens of police units joined the pursuit. Hostages were used as human shields as the gunmen switched drivers during the chase and continued firing at officers. One hostage was pushed out of the car mid-chase, but luckily survived. Another was released near a hospital while Misty remained in the vehicle. During the final shootout, over 600 rounds were exchanged, and the chase ended when police disabled the car. After a final burst of bullets, 2 suspects died at the scene, but the third survived. Misty Holt Singh was found dead in the backseat, killed by police gunfire. A review later criticized the officers' actions, and the city of Stockton settled a lawsuit with Holt Singh's family for $6 million. The event remains one of modern U.S. history's most intense and controversial shootouts. Dallas Police Ambush, 2016. In the summer of 2016, tensions in the city were at an all-time high after the controversial police shooting of Alton Sterling earlier that month, which sparked widespread protests and civil unrest. On the night of July 7th, protesters gathered in downtown Dallas to march against police brutality. Around 8:58 p.m., Micah Xavier Johnson, a 25-year-old former Army reservist, began shooting at police officers from an elevated position near the protest. He had positioned himself near a parking garage and used a semi-automatic rifle to target law enforcement personnel assigned to protect the protest. Chaos erupted across the city center, and protesters ran for cover as officers attempted to locate the source of the gunfire. Within minutes, officers were falling, and others were pinned down by gunfire. Johnson used tactical movement and knowledge from his military background to ambush police officers from multiple angles. He moved through the parking structure while continuing to strike officers at close range. Authorities tried to negotiate with Johnson for several hours, but he expressed a desire to kill police officers and claimed to have planted bombs throughout the area. After failing negotiations, the police had to make a decision, and at approximately 2:30 a.m., they deployed a robot carrying an explosive device into the parking garage. The detonation killed Johnson instantly. It was the first time in U.S. law enforcement history that a robot-delivered explosive was used to neutralize a suspect. 5 officers were killed, 9 more were injured, along with 2 civilians. It became the deadliest attack on U.S. law enforcement since 9/11. Baton Rouge Police Ambush, 2016. On the morning of July 17th, Gavin Eugene Long, a 29-year-old former Marine from Missouri, arrived in Baton Rouge armed with a semi-automatic rifle, body armor, and extra ammunition. At around 8:40 a.m., he ambushed officers near a gas station on Airline Highway, opening fire without warning, targeting officers from both the Baton Rouge Police Department and the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office. Officers were hit before they could do anything, while civilians scrambled for cover as gunfire broke out. Gavin moved tactically, using parked cars and structures for cover while firing on responding units. For nearly 10 minutes, the area around the gas station turned into a war zone. 3 officers were fatally wounded, and 3 more sustained injuries before backup could intervene. A SWAT team arrived and quickly engaged the suspect. A sharpshooter from the team ultimately shot and killed Long during the standoff, ending the ambush before more lives were lost. Level 3, All-Out War. San Bernardino Terror Attack, 2015. On December 2nd, 2015, the San Bernardino County Public Health Department held a holiday training and banquet at the Inland Regional Center, a facility that serves people with developmental disabilities. Among the staff was Syed Rizwan Farouk, a 28-year-old environmental health specialist. He had attended the event earlier in the morning, but then abruptly left without saying anything. A few hours later, Farouk returned, but this time with his wife, Tashfeen Malik. Both were dressed in tactical gear and armed with semi-automatic rifles and handguns. And at approximately 10:59 a.m., they entered the conference room and opened fire on the gathering. 14 people were killed and 22 were wounded in just minutes. The attackers fled in a black SUV, leaving behind a package containing a pipe bomb rigged to a remote-control toy car, which luckily failed to detonate. Around 3 p.m., officers intercepted the SUV, and a gunfight broke out on the streets of San Bernardino. The suspects fired over 380 rounds, while police returned more than 440. They had thousands of rounds of ammo and had prepared for a much longer assault. The firing finally ended when both Farouk and Malik were shot dead inside their vehicle. 2 officers were wounded in the exchange, and the shootout marked the violent conclusion of a 4-hour reign of terror that had turned an office party into a massacre. The Complexo do Alamo Gang War, 2004. The Complexo do Alamo is one of Rio's most densely densely populated areas, a maze of alleys and stacked homes, long plagued by drug trafficking and extreme poverty. In the early 2000s, it had become a stronghold for organized crime, where cartels operated like paramilitary forces. On March 31, 2004, after a spike in gang violence, police launched a raid to try to regain control. And at 4 p.m., over 1,000 officers from elite Brazilian police units moved in. The drug traffickers hiding inside were armed with AK-47s, AR-15s, and machine guns. The shootout quickly broke out and carried on for hours as snipers took positions on rooftops, while civilians in nearby homes were trapped in the crossfire, some hiding under beds, and others were crawling across floors to avoid stray bullets. The police were heavily outgunned, and multiple armored vehicles were hit. Schools and homes were riddled with bullets. The traffickers had deep knowledge of the terrain, using tunnels and alleys to ambush the officers. By the end, more than 30 people were confirmed dead while dozens were injured, including both civilians and police. Norco bank robbery and police shootout, 1980. On May 9, 1980, 5 heavily armed men stormed a Security Pacific Bank in Norco, California. They were carrying AR-15s, shotguns, handguns, and homemade explosives. The robbery was over in minutes, but as the suspects exited the bank, Riverside County Sheriff's Deputy Glenn Belaski arrived on the scene. The robbers opened fire immediately, riddling his patrol car with bullets. One of the suspects, Belisario Delgado, was killed in the initial exchange, but the rest escaped in a stolen truck. As the suspects fled, they threw homemade pipe bombs out of the moving vehicle and fired on police with automatic rifles. A second shootout broke out in a suburban neighborhood, and another deputy, James Evans, was shot and killed during the pursuit. The chase continued for over 30 miles into the San Bernardino Mountains. At one point, the suspects abandoned their vehicle and tried to ambush officers on foot, firing from the high ground. By the end of the confrontation, hundreds of rounds had been fired, and another suspect, Manuel Delgado, was killed during the mountain shootout. The remaining 3, George Smith and the Harvin brothers, were captured and later convicted of 46 felonies, receiving life sentences without parole. If you like this video, subscribe for similar ones or leave a comment to suggest another.